officially start the meeting right now. It's 6:03.
5:03.
So, hi, I'm Renee Grode and also go by Maureen, Chair of the Select Board. John, you're next to my little circle. I don't know where you are and anybody else's.
I'm the top left here, but John Martin, 106 Clark Street, member of the Select Board.
Matt Rowland, member of Select Board.
Chris Fowles, Select Board.
Christine Tishman, Select Board.
John Lumbrough, School Committee.
Allison Radon, School Committee.
Gregory Bennett, School Committee.
Julianne Tauscher, School Committee.
Austin Rogers, School Committee.
I guess that's everyone. Hi, Tammy. Okay, Ed, would you like to read your little preamble?
Sure. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 and March 23rd order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Town of Southampton Select Board and Southampton School Committee is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to or view this meeting while in progress may do so by go to zoom.us/join, hit join a meeting in the top right of your screen. Type in the meeting ID 875-5911-9247. Enter the password 260402 and hit join. Please be sure to mute your device when joining in. Note, to join in video meeting with cell phone, you will need to download the Zoom app from the App Store. The call-in telephone number is 646-558-8656. Or by watching public access TV, Charter Spectrum Channel 191. In-person attendance and public comment at Select Board meetings will be suspended until further notice. If you email a written public comment before the scheduled Select Board meeting, it'll be read at that Select Board meeting. If you email a written public comment after viewing something at a live televised Select Board meeting, it'll be read at the next Select Board meeting. Please send your public comments via email to selectmen@townofsouthampton.org. Please note that all public comments must be within the requirements for the policy on public comments listed in the open time for the public on the Select Board agenda.
All right, thanks, Ed. We begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you want to just join me. I pledge allegiance
To the
to
flag
the flag of the United States
of America,
and to the republic
for which it
Which
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible,
Indivisible.
with liberty and justice for all.
for all. It's always a challenge to be a little in unison there. So the first agenda item is a joint meeting with the Southampton School Committee to fill a vacancy on the local school committee. So I don't know, Matt, if you wanted, you're a liaison to the local school committee. I don't know if you wanted to say anything, or if the Southampton School Committee wants to just discuss this.
I'm happy to have John lead the discussion here. I mean, I think we all know why we're here, to nominate Austin to school committee, but probably best to have John describe that.
Okay, John. Are you here with us, John?
I am.
We
I'm
can
in
see him.
the spotty spot.
Okay, okay. Okay, so
So
there
you
has to be
I
a
can say,
vote.
if he's in a tough spot, I can say a few
Okay,
words.
go ahead, Matt.
Okay, so I mean, we're here to talk about and hopefully nominate Austin Rogers. He's been serving as an appointed member of the school committee for the last year. Obviously, we've been going through some challenging times with regard to COVID. I can tell you that school committee has been meeting publicly weekly, but has been frankly meeting almost daily with regard to superintendent rehiring responsibilities, with regard to union negotiations, contract negotiations, school opening negotiations. Many of these things are happening in executive session. These sessions go, well past midnight. Austin was on the ballot and received hundreds of votes to be a member of school committee. Obviously, we had the back out of Kate Chilston a couple days before the election, and obviously in the absence of that back out, Austin would have been elected. He's a valuable member of school committee, has a great knowledge bank, obviously has lived through the situation that we've all lived through here in the last year, which I think is intrinsically valuable to have that bank of information with regard to COVID, and is a valuable asset to school committee, and obviously is showing an interest at getting reappointed to that board. And I think that about summarizes it.
Great. All right. Thanks, Matt. So I don't know if anybody else in the local school committee wants to say anything, or if you just want to vote for that appointment.
I'd like to say
Great.
just that, in the short time that Austin's been on the committee, he's been absolutely great. He has a perspective that's unique, that wasn't really filled on the school committee before, and I definitely think we should appoint him to continue on in the position. I think he'll continue to do a great job.
Great. Great. Austin, do you want to say anything about your appointment? I mean, I know you've been serving, and we appreciate that.
Yeah, so back in March, I saw a post on Facebook that Matt made saying that they needed people to step up on the school committee, and so I was told it was one meeting a month. And then the school shut down and the country went off the rails, so that didn't quite happen like that. I think that with or without me, the local school committee has some great passionate people on it, so I like being a part of the group. Like Matt was mentioning, we have a lot of irons in the fire right now, working on a lot of things. I'd like to continue to serve on those things, but obviously it's up to you guys to decide whether or not to do that, and I totally respect that. I think that what I've said in the past, why this is particular interest to me, is because I'm a big stakeholder in the schools, both the Norris school and the regional, because I have kids there and family members that are attending in high numbers. So we have a very high enrollment in my family. And so I'm very interested in, in making those, as supported as possible. And so I see that as my role as a school committee member, and just making sure that, at least for Southampton, the scope is Norris, making sure that that school has enough support and advocacy in order to run at a high quality for all the students that go there.
Great. Well, thanks for your continuing wanting to do this. Anybody else want to say anything before we vote?
Well,
Okay, so,
I'm going to
local...
recuse myself from the vote.
Right. Yep,
Yeah.
That's correct. So does the local school committee want to go ahead and vote first
Do we need a
recommend his
motion on the
appointment,
floor to
or
vote for Austin?
So someone's officially
gonna
going to
say
have
it?
to nominate Austin, and we'll need a second.
I nominate Austin Rogers then.
Okay.
And I second that.
Who seconded it?
Allison,
Okay, so
right
that's
on.
Greg and then Julianne.
And this is to a 3-year appointment to school committee, correct?
No,
Oh.
it'll be till the next election.
Because the
Okay.
appointments only go until the next election.
Okay.
So did you get that, Greg and then Julianne?
Okay, I thought it was
Okay, any further
Allison.
comment, question?
Julianne?
Yeah.
No, it was Allison.
It was
Allison.
Allison.
Okay.
Okay.
It's hard on here, I know.
Okay, motion and second. No other questions, comments? All those in favor, we do have to do a roll call vote.
Correct. So does the school committee want to go first? Say their name and aye or nay, and then the select board members can do the same?
Sure. Allison Radon, aye.
Julianne Tauscher, aye.
Gregory Bennett, aye.
John's frozen.
Yeah.
He's muted.
He's
Thumbs up. He said thumbs up.
he's a
Okay.
thumbs up. He's muted, but he said
He's-
thumbs up. There he is.
Okay.
Lumber, aye.
There it is.
There
There
it
we
is.
are.
On top of a mountain somewhere.
All right.
Select board?
Now the select board?
Fowles eye.
Roland, aye.
Fishman, aye.
Martin, aye.
And Groden, aye. All right, thank you very much. Just want to say thank you to the local school committee. I mean, it's so much going on. It's amazing. And I thought our meetings were long, but I think you broke our record even. So thank you for all the work you're doing. It's a lot with the superintendent and with virtual, and to all of you that are parents, my heart goes out to you. I was telling everybody that, boy, was I glad when February and April vacation got over. I can't even imagine what you're dealing with. So thank you on all accounts.
And Austin, I'll let you know that.
We just have one other agenda item.
Yeah, but let me let Austin know that tomorrow we'll get an appointment letter out to him for this appointment, and then he'll need to make an appointment with Lucy Dalton, town clerk, to be sworn in.
Okay.
Yeah, that would have to be before your next select board, school committee meeting in order to vote. Yes,
Correct.
Tammy, hi.
Tammy Walunas, 298 College Highway, Hampshire Regional School Committee. I have to say this group of representatives for the local school committee are very involved in things. And I really hope that when the time comes, that when you come up to Hampshire Regional, you can be on that, see what happens, and really know what's going on up there, and keep your enthusiasm. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope so too. I think that when you're, like my kids went to Norris, they had a wonderful time in the Southampton School Department. And when they went up to Hampshire, it's in a different town and they're older. And so for some people, it's a little bit more one step removed. So I was on the Hampshire Regional School Committee, and it's really important that, we stay involved and represented there. So thank you. Thanks, Tammy, for that comment. Anybody else have anything else?
Yeah. So we have a really.
And if the school committee would like to, what?
I'm sorry. We have a really important vote on Wednesday.
Mhm.
To hopefully appoint someone that the subcommittee is able to put forward for interim superintendent. So if possible, to get the appointment letter electronically so that I can get over to Lucy's office before that vote.
What's your email address, Austin?
It is, I have to look at the initials at the end. It's A Rogers, ROGERS, at it's scm.hr-k12.org.
Okay, you want to go through A Rogers at scm.
Yep.
.hr-k12.org.
Yep, that's right.
Okay,
Cool.
we'll take care of that for you.
All right.
Great, so you can go in there tomorrow then?
Yes.
You can go in
Yeah,
there
so he's got a
tomorrow,
meeting
get
tomorrow
sworn
evening,
in?
so we got to get this out ASAP so he can get to see Lucy tomorrow.
Great.
And then Ed, I shot you and Austin an email, so you can just respond to that if you want.
Oh, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. That makes it easy.
Okay, so the select board has one more agenda item. I don't know if you, this local school committee wanted to vote to adjourn your part of the meeting. If somebody wanted to make a motion and take care of that.
I'll make a
I think that's the
motion.
only thing on your agenda, correct?
I'll make a motion then
Okay,
to
Greg?
adjourn the Southampton School Committee meeting at this point in time, which looks like it's at 5:17 PM.
I'll
I
second that motion. Allison.
Got it. It's all good.
Everybody's so enthusiastic. I was gonna say. All right.
Okay, Gregory and Allison, then I guess a roll call vote.
Roll
Yep.
call vote, yes. please.
Bennett, aye.
Radon, aye.
Tauscher, aye.
John's gone.
All right, and Austin can't vote at the moment, so I call the meeting as of 5:17 PM. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, thank you.
All right, have a good
All right,
evening, everyone.
thanks,
Keep up the good
everybody.
work.
Yeah.
Thank
Congrats,
you.
Austin.
Okay, so we also had on here the
CARES Act funding?
reports, but we were going to defer the reports unless somebody had something urgent until next Tuesday. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, and then the only other item of business then is new business is the CARES Act funding. I don't believe we have the approval of the short-term disability paperwork, right,
No, we do not.
Ed?
No, we don't, Rini.
Okay, so that's the only other, okay, all right. So the only other agenda item is about the CARES Act, and a number of questions have come up along the way in the last week about the CARES Act, both the process and also the funding of it. And I know that now there is a committee that's looking at grants. So I just wanted to have a discussion about two parts of it. One is, I personally feel that the select board was kept a little bit in the dark about the process and also what was requested as part of the CARES Act. I don't expect the various department heads, when they're doing grants for their own departments, like I know Chief Illingsworth, Workman, the school department, they write grants. I don't think the committee that is part of this grants committee's job is to sort of overstep and write grants on behalf of department heads and committees and so forth. But the CARES Act is a municipal funding grant, and it goes across departments. So I just wanted to have an understanding about the process that happened the first time around and who was involved, and also a little bit more understanding about what was requested for funding and what was granted, because we just continue to have questions that come up as we learn different parts of the award that we were not even informed about. So anyway, I just wondered, Ed, if you could start by just explaining about the process, and also if the grant group could also update us on the process for, or Ed for that matter, on the phase 2 or part 2 of the CARES Act funding.
Certainly, and I think there was a definite, process that was put in place, and it probably changed along the way the first time around as far as the CARES Act went. And Jerry Swanson had taken the lead, because actually, as it started out, it was more on the lines, I'll say, of PPE, nursing, outreach, items like that. So Jerry Swanson had taken the lead, and it probably started out basically concentrated on the departments like the police, the fire, EMS, the health department, public safety. I got involved a little bit, at least for the town hall end of things. And then as the deadline grew closer, we actually had a meeting to go over things and what departments had requested to that point in time. It was probably about that point in time, even though Jerry put the list together of the different departments, that I probably stepped in and took over, because of the fact that I was going to have to be the one that actually did the application. And I did see some, definite, shall we say, areas that probably didn't get addressed as strongly as they should have. And Jerry and I went out and reached out to the Council on Aging and to the library to find out what their needs might be, and add those to the list. And then, as you know, the deadline got pushed ahead. I always mix it up when it gets later, if it's ahead or back. We had another week to put in our application. The application was challenging because you really couldn't work through it until you actually entered the items. And there were different categories in the application that, and you can see some of them from the, the information that I sent out. And so I had to extrapolate from the list of departmental requests of what might go into each particular category. And some of those categories, they tell you right in there that, okay, these categories should be FEMA reimbursement eligible. Therefore, basically in those categories, they'll deduct the 75% that the town should be putting in for FEMA, and they'll only give you a credit for the 25% remainder. There are other categories that actually they don't deduct the 75%. Can be, 100% eligible for the reimbursement portion. So we went through that and put it in, and it was probably, I would say, at least a month, if not longer, before we actually heard back. They did ask us a couple questions. They asked us some questions about the UHF radios that the police department had put in for, and a couple of other questions. But in the end, we actually ended up getting funded for everything that we had requested. So there wasn't anything that was denied as far as that goes. And by my memory, I think we had actually put our total request that we put in for was like $334,000 or $335,000. And once they did the FEMA, did the deduction for FEMA, I think we ended up with $223,000 that was awarded to us. Yeah, $223,430.
Okay.
But that does account for everything that Southampton, we had put in for the Southampton application.
Thanks,
And
Nick.
I do agree that going forward that we still have phase 2, which they haven't put out the applications or deadlines or anything as of yet, but we still should plan for that.
We're getting some emails about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I fully agree that I do believe that the select board should be more active and informed of what departments are requesting to be funded for phase 2.
I'd like to know a little more detail about phase 1.
Yeah, we're still having questions about phase 1. Every time we turn around, it comes up as a surprise to us. So the whole point in going through the process is to understand how it went the first time around, and so that there's a little bit more transparency the second time around. So there were some questions I know, but I just wanted to clarify. So when the request was made for a particular item, it was clear when you made the request that it was a FEMA reimbursed at 75% item. So is that true?
Not necessarily. When you put it in the application, there were categories in the application that they would tell you that this should be FEMA eligible for reimbursement.
Okay.
So we're only going to give you 25% on that.
Okay. So then when you figured it all out and there was a discrepancy because FEMA picked up about $100,000 of this, Southampton was allotted, I think, up to $500,000, right? In the CARES Act when the original came about.
I think it's 530.
It's 95 something. Oh, that's.
I should have it.
Really? Okay, but that's okay. I think what my question is though, now that we know what the ceiling is, I'm assuming that they're only allowing. So the balance that we would have left would be the total award we got, or the total award plus the 75 from FEMA?
No, the total would,
How much more money can we get?
so let me just find out in here, because I know it has the original allotment in it, which was, oh, come on. I know it was in the, oh, here it is. We were eligible for 546,000 and some change. And we were funded for 223, so we've still got 323,000 and some change left
that's what
that
I
we're
thought.
eligible for in phase 2.
All right, they're not counting the FEMA 75 as, you know, I can't, didn't think that would happen, but I just wanted to double check. So the amount we have coming back or available to us is $323,000.
Correct.
But of which they would still,
Okay.
if we had a FEMA eligible item in that 323, they would still take that, right? I mean,
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
I mean, theoretically in
Yep.
phase, and I'm just making this number up, theoretically in phase 2, we may end up requesting, you know, $425,000 worth of goods, and what's FEMA eligible would be reduced by 75%, and that would bring us down to around the 323.
Your
Okay.
original, if I can read these numbers, your original request was for 338,000, of which we got 223, correct?
Correct.
And now they're going to allow us more money in phase 2 without ever accounting for the money that we used in phase 1?
Well, anything we don't use in phase 1, we have to give back. So what we may want to do is go through phase 1, and if there's anything in here that we aren't going to actually use or whatever, probably follow up and see if we actually return that, if we'd be eligible to pick that up in phase 2.
And what's the deadline for spending in phase 1? December?
For both phases, it's December 30th.
Okay.
And one of the reports, I think, is fairly soon due, the first report.
Correct.
Okay.
December 30th of this year,
So,
right?
Yeah.
Yes, December 30th of 2020.
Yeah. So basically everything, it had to be for things, I was sitting in on a webinar for this past week. It has to be for costs, for things not already budgeted as of March 27th, when the CARES Act was enacted, and then only through December 30th of this year.
That's correct.
So
what was this? Go ahead, Francine.
no, I was just thinking, doesn't that give us a big loophole since we didn't have our budget? You're talking about our FY20 or FY21 budget?
Well, no one really had their fiscal year 21 budget on March 27th. So basically what they were saying for that, with that March 27th date, was that you really hadn't budgeted for that item in actually the fiscal year 20 budget.
Okay.
Yeah. So any of that PPE and disinfectant and all those kinds of things obviously fit, because we didn't even have a clue about those before March 27th, right?
Correct.
What about fiscal 21? Were they expecting us to budget for PPE and all that other stuff in the budget, which was then excluded from the CARES?
I didn't follow your question, John.
Well, we couldn't have budgeted in fiscal 20 because we were at the tail end of fiscal 20. But we were in the middle of COVID as we were doing the fiscal 21 budget. Were they expecting us to put in our regular budget money to take care of the issues with COVID? Or can we still claim those expenses on this grant?
Well, I'm trying to think of an example of, say we had identified back in February that, I don't know, the fire department or the police department was requesting, I don't know, ultraviolet light cleaners in fiscal year 21 for the budget, and we're going to request them. that would probably become an ineligible item because in fiscal year 21, because it had been brought up in the budget process before March 27th.
So that could be an issue then.
Well, depending what we're buying or what have you. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see a lot of that out there, to this point in time.
Anything on the capital budget would be exempt under that, example, I would think. Our 5-year budget, if we were looking to purchase it regardless, that would take it away from this grant.
Yeah, that's a possibility. Yes.
But I think that the main thing, though, to keep in mind, and Ed, maybe you can clarify this more, but what I heard from the webinar is that the reason, this deadline of December 30th means we have to have received the benefit of this thing, this funding for whatever that item is by December 30th.
Correct.
So,
and then
anything long-term, like a, piece of equipment, if it was going to be, later purchase, we wouldn't have that benefit.
Right. And then unless something happens that it looks like COVID-19 is going to go out into a decent portion of calendar year 21, and they go back in through the legislature and they change the December 30th, 2020 date and push it out. I mean, I wouldn't count on that, but it's it could be a possibility.
So was that information known at the time that this grant was applied for? That the benefit of these services had to be realized? So I guess my question is then, why was it set up, the EMD, the way it was, and why was it set up for the assistant to the fire department that way? If the expectation is that the benefit of this service has to be used, is the expectation that the money for this was going to be used by the 30th?
Because there was still some ambiguity at that time, and I think there still is on the December 30th date, because what they referred to was 2 phases, and phase 1 was supposed to be to cover any costs for fiscal year 20, and phase 2 was supposed to be to cover any costs for fiscal year 21. Really? And they talked at the time about the possibility of that December 30th, 2020 date being pushed out.
Okay, but phase 1 is the funds that we just received, and we talked about a payment. I mean, we didn't talk at all about the assistant fire department. We will probably see a PCF at some point, a PRF, but if those services have to be realized by December 30th, that is a little bit inconsistent with what we have been talking about relative to the EMD. I'm not sure that we've talked at all about anything relative to positions within the fire department. But I'm just wondering if we could just go through, like, again, because there's a couple of other questions that came up that I would like to have an answer to. So if I could just quickly kind of go through, if you don't have the information right available, that's okay. Yep. But for the funding, which by the way has my name on it, first responder cost, which I didn't sign by the way, first responder cost is direct staffing cost, $20,000. Additional hires, is that the fire department administrative assistant?
No, that was actually some costs that we had actually looked like we were going to incur in fiscal year 20 for whether it was overtime cost or cost to fill in the fire or the police department that were directly associated with COVID-19.
But we already sort of reconciled the budget on FY20, so what happens to that money? Since I don't believe the budget covered.
Well, if those costs were directly related to COVID-19, then we would be eligible to get those covered through the CARES Act. Or through
okay.
Yeah.
And then where is our budget? What's that?
So that's still eligible.
Okay, for 21 and 20? Because I thought you just said that the expectation is that CARES 1 would be 20.
Well, for the most part, and that was for at least for that was the numbers that I had at my disposal, that it looked like we were either had spent or were going to spend during fiscal year 20.
Okay. But we already reconciled the books for 20 for the most part. So hopefully that would be able to be used for FY21. And is that the same for B, the quarantine isolation cost for first responders who may be infected or should, blah, 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 $5,000? So that's all, is that also for the first responders personnel?
Yes, it is. And that was just a
Okay,
guess.
so there's $25,000.
That was just a guesstimate at that
Okay,
point.
so there's $25,000. All right, so there's $25,000 in the budget right now for the use by the fire department or police or first responders in case of overtime, quarantine, backfill, all that, right?
Correct.
Then it says staff for compliance and reporting associated with this funding. That's the 10,000. Is that the administrative assistant?
Rini, sorry, are you reading the application we submitted, or which document are you on?
Yes, she is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just wanted to
It
follow.
was part of the agenda for that. It's in the,
Yep.
after the agenda.
No, I just wanted to be sure I was there, not on the Excel sheet. Thank you.
Okay, so the staff for compliance and reporting associated with this funding must be the administrative assistant at 10,000?
Let's see.
It says health director.
No, I've got it down as health director overtime.
So she's the one that's actually taking care of the $25,000 for the first responders overtime and quarantine isolation costs for first responders?
No, this would just be for, by my notes, staff for compliance reporting, health director overtime. So it's just for compliance reporting.
So who's tracking that?
That should be tracked through our accounting system and payroll.
And
So Jerry is going to be paid $10,000 and her job is to track staff for compliance and reporting associated with the CARES Act funding. So it's her job to provide oversight for the CARES Act funding. It says right here, staff for compliance and reporting associated with this funding. So she'll be monitoring and keeping track of the this fund.
No, that's not the way I had read this when I did the application. I had read this as compliance and reporting. I read the associated with this funding for compliance with COVID-19.
Okay, it specifically says with this funding. So I don't think that that's, unless is that, to me, that's like Vicky. Okay, so accelerated telehealth capacity, infrastructure subscriptions, laptops, that's 3480, and that is assumed to be eligible for FEMA. So the laptops, all that is, what department is that, the 3480?
It was, let's see, there was laptops for police chief and fire chief for $3,000 and Zoom accounts for $480.
Great. And then hiring and training, including training for employees and contractors hired for COVID-19 response, 8,300.
Yeah, that one is under town hall and COA, and includes janitorial costs.
Why would that be
Hiring
training?
and training, including training for employees and contractors hired for COVID-19. So that's custodial and what else? Council on Aging?
Custodial for both.
Town hall, council, and council on aging, including janitorial costs.
So
For
it's,
Okay.
any
Have we
extra
used-
cleaning we would have to do.
so it's training the custodial staff on how to do the cleaning?
Well, I look at it as hiring and training. So hiring, if we had to hire someone to do extra cleaning over the hours that our current custodian had.
So
It says employees and contractors. So keeping with the intention of it being used by the 30th, that's something that should happen sooner rather than later, right?
Correct, if we need it.
Okay, and then the 46,000 is for PPE, including
Correct.
first responders, grocery store employees, gas station attendants, and others who interact with the public. So is the Board of Health actually extending any PPE to Big Y, Pure Foods?
Not sure if they are.
I mean, or
but I can give you.
that's a lot of money, and we have a lot of PPE right now.
Yeah, but I can give you the breakdown on that. The police had requested $10,000 in PPE, the fire 20,000, health department 10,000, the library 500, town hall 1,500, thermometers 3 for police and 3 for health of $1,440, and then health items for Norris of $2,447. And the Council on Aging, $1,000.
That's great.
but going back to what Rini had asked, did we supply any of the businesses in town with PPE?
That I don't know.
Okay, well, it doesn't really sound like unless any of these people are going to be distributing, because that pretty much adds up to, actually, it adds
Right,
up to
I
about
come back to the fact that,
40,000.
yeah, I come back to the fact that masks were being given out free by the Congregational Church to townspeople. And in other communities, the Board of Health distributed masks to people who were in need. So I'm wondering if there were funds for that, could that have been supplemented? Because I know they've run out of masks and they've had to turn people away.
The next item, that's, thanks, Francine. The next item is 30,000 and $30,500 for cleaning disinfection of public buildings. So is that in addition to the previous hiring and training of employees and contractors for this COVID-19 response?
Yes, and what is down for that is UV cleaning lights for the police department, $500. Disinfectant for Norris, $500. Disinfectant for the COA, $500. UV ambulance lamp for the fire department, $10,000. Cleaning and disinfecting service for fire or EMS, $10,000. Foggers for fire and EMS, $5,000. Disinfectant for the parks, $2,000. Town hall, $1,500. And disinfectant for the library, $500.
I'm looking at some of these things and wondering if some of the expenses associated with the annual town meeting and the special town meeting we have coming up couldn't have been used from this fund.
I know on the budget they're listed as COVID-related expenses. I don't see why not.
They'll either be filed against FEMA or possibly some of this.
Okay.
Yeah, this definitely shouldn't be in the operating budget. I mean, this is totally related to FEMA. I mean,
It's
the
COVID-19.
COVID.
Yep.
Correct.
So planning and development, including IT cost. And this is under the category of school distance learning to the extent not funded from other sources. Planning and development, including IT costs, $500, that seems incredibly low.
That was what the school distance learning from Norris had asked for in that category.
Ed, are you aware, did they get FEMA money in addition? I know that the high school did. Matt may know because he's on the local committee. Did they get money for all this, instructional enhancements and equipment and everything?
I'm not aware of that.
Mm.
And the food for families that rely on it. I mean, there was a whole bunch of subcategories here that the school could have applied for if they hadn't received it elsewhere.
Yeah.
Or it could have been part of this.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been some emails circulating around, like from Kate Mesmer, and I reached out to Eliza several times during this process. I mean, we got to make sure that they're included in the second round.
Yep.
The effort, I believe, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I was really trying to get them to engage. So there's part of me that believes that they got what they needed, and I'm not sure if it was through the Hampshire regional process and it was all pooled together, but I don't know. I'm left scratching my head about it, and I know that I had CC'd a ton of people on emails, Eliza, John, that ended up trickling up to Kate Mesmer from a technology standpoint. We got some responses back. It was a while ago.
Yep.
Okay, the next thing is, what's that?
No, I was saying, they were challenged over the summer in trying to provide food to families and to students.
Yeah.
And they had to, they ended the program, I thought June 30th, they're resuming it, but if this money could be used for paying staff for that as well. Anyway, just a question about where.
Yeah.
If they got what they should get here.
Now, Ed, on this money, if we want to pay for food that goes back a couple of months on this second wave, can we do that, or does it have to be as of the date we make the application forward? Or is it, because if we can take some of the money and fund it backwards, if it was related, that would be great.
I would have to say it would probably, I'll double check, but I would think that it would have to be in phase 2 from July 1st forward, but I can double check on that.
But that would even be great. That gives us several months that we can go back by the time we file this.
And
I agree.
I don't think that was in the original budget, any of this stuff that we're talking about. So it might.
Right.
Yeah. And it wasn't clear when I listened on the webinar, it wasn't clear to me. There was some illusion that if you had come up with an unforeseen need now that you hadn't put in your application, that you might be able to switch something from a line item or take a portion from a line item to allocate it to this, as long as it was a COVID related need. But I think that needs to be double checked, because we might be able to just do some budget line shifting a little bit if we find that, we aren't going to spend everything in a particular line as anticipated or something. I mean, there didn't seem to be an end date for phase 1 from what I heard, Ed. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but.
Yeah, but I think they just said, rather than having everyone put in everything in the beginning, because, I'll even say it now is, okay, basically we put this together back in May with it supposed to be applied for at the beginning of June, and they did extend that out a week. But, at that point in time, we were still in the middle of it. We didn't totally know what we may need or might not need, or what would affect it. So, it was somewhat guesswork. So, I mean, I think they actually did phase 1 and phase 2 so that towns and cities may be covered, and as things changed with COVID-19 or different things needed to be addressed, you could do it in a couple phases rather than everybody putting in everything at once and then finding out, well, geez, we didn't need all that stuff. But, you know, all of a sudden September rolls around, schools go back into session, you know, colleges go back in, and the needs have totally changed.
Yeah, no, and I wouldn't disagree with that. And I think part of it is that whatever we have been awarded, to my understanding, it can still be spent through December 30th. It doesn't,
Right.
it can be as well as whatever we get for phase 2 has to be. Okay, so just because we're starting to maybe enter and apply for phase 2 next month, it doesn't mean that we have to have spent everything in phase 1 yet, but we have to start spending it, obviously, if we're going to realize the benefit of it.
Right, exactly. And if we've identified items that we got money for in phase 1 that we haven't utilized or aren't going to utilize all that money, it doesn't make sense to put in for maybe more money or as much money as we might in phase 2 for those items.
Yeah, I mean, I think we want to avoid giving back any money. That would be my preference.
Oh yeah, absolutely, I agree.
But we also can't just use money for a purpose that wasn't intended for in the application. We don't have the liberty of doing a line item transfer on a grant application. There's just 2 other item list on here.
Yep.
What's that?
No, I'm just saying, I wasn't sure.
Boards
that
of
was my
health
point.
staffing needs.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Boards of health staffing needs to the extent not addressed with public health funding, $6,500.
Now I see 65,000.
65,000, correct.
1,000, yeah.
65,000, right.
Right.
For what's that?
Let's see if I got this in the right order. So they had, let's say, a personnel and clinical, $20,000.
What's that supposed to mean?
Not sure.
Personnel and clinical?
Clinical, yeah, which I would take as basically if we had a clinic like shots or something
Oh,
along.
clinic. I thought you said clinical.
Clinical, yeah.
You did.
Okay. Okay.
Let's see. What else? They had put in the wages, $10,000. Let's see what else we got here.
Who's that for?
It doesn't say, it was just general wages for, and I would assume those were for if they had to hire anybody additional or for overtime. Let's say.
Separate from the other category that was also funding for the Board of Health?
The different line item, yeah.
Yeah, it's a different line item, so I would think so, but I could be wrong.
That was actually staff for compliance and reporting associated with this funding you had said was the Board of Health. So that's also an additional $10,000. Okay.
Correct. Let's see.
Now that $65,000 we're talking about, if that hasn't been utilized, that's what, 25, 30% of the total we received. And if we don't utilize it, it's just gonna go back.
Well, and the other question I have, are we going to follow the usual process of recruiting and hiring people? Or
Well,
how is this happening?
Well, it depends on
Posting
if
positions?
they're hired as an employee or if they're hired as a contractor.
And what about issuing contracts? Who does that? And do we see that? And who signs those? Because these are commitments on behalf of the town, not on behalf of any particular department.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so there was a PH nurse, shared services, $35,000.
And what was that for?
The personnel and
Public health
clinical,
nurse.
$20,000.
What was the second one for 20,000?
You're breaking up?
Yeah, we all are.
What was the one after the public health nurse for 35,000?
Public health nurse shared services, it's one item, $35,000.
Okay,
Then you had the personnel clinical, the $20,000. And then the wage is $10,000.
whose wages, do you know?
No, it just came through on the sheet as wages.
And here it says staff for compliance
Oh,
reporting,
that's already 10,000 above. That's an
Health.
additional 10,000 then.
another 10.
And I may have double counted that $10,000, so.
No, I'm looking at the application and it says $10,000 for, we already talked about it, staffing and compliance and reporting associated with this funding. To me, that doesn't sound like the role of the health director.
And
It
you might
sounds
be
like
right.
staffing and staffing. Okay, to me, that would be like Vicky, the additional time and effort
Mhm.
that would go into the reporting
Mhm.
or payroll, you
Plus-
know, or Jen.
Plus requesting
So
the FEMA.
so
plus
this one
requesting
here
the-
is,
Plus requesting the FEMA reimbursement.
Right.
I mean, that's definitely Vicky's time that should be paid for.
yep.
Yeah.
So the 46,000 is 20 personal and clinical, 10 general wages, and 35 public health nurse. That comes out to 65.
Yeah.
And
And we have a public health nurse that we share with somebody?
No, but if we needed one and had to hire one, or had to hire a number of them,
Okay.
Okay,
Of the 65,000, can we get a reconciliation so we know what we're spending of this, if we spent any of it?
well,
sure.
we're already spending it, John. That's one of the reasons why this is all being discussed.
right,
And
in
which
one
we
instance,
will,
But,
yeah, just
but we don't know that we're spending it like on a public
Right.
health nurse, right? We haven't,
Right.
I think that's John's point, is that
Yeah.
we're starting to spend some stuff, but it may not be anywhere near
What
the
we asked
spending
for.
pattern that we anticipated or what was asked for, right?
Correct,
Yeah,
exactly.
if we have $65,000 for Board of Health staffing needs, they should be able to give us a listing of how that money's been spent and where and in what type of position, or if it hasn't been, is it going to be between now and the end of the year? Because it may be money sitting there that just sits there till the end of the year and we lose it.
and then we give it back.
and
we
again,
don't
this
wanna
has
do
to be very clear that this is, and I'm the liaison to the Board of Health. The problem is they give a, 48-hour notice. I've mentioned this before of meetings, and then they meet at a time that's not on Zoom. So I think it has to be 100% clear that this money, and if you're adding additional 65 to additional, that's more than just 65. This is not determined by the Board of Health committee and voting. This is a municipal grant. And so I really want to make it 100% clear that they need to report to us on this funding.
Well, the thing, we've picked up, Chris and I, as she took over for clerk, went through the vendor warrant last week, and that's when we started to pick up some expenses that we didn't have any detail on because they're reported in two categories on our expense report that we're using here in town. It comes under wages, and the other category is expenses. It does not detail what it is until after the fact, or who it is until after the fact. So we have no reference to go back and really track whether or not we're meeting, the conditions of the application that we submitted.
Yeah.
when Vicky
Yeah, so
sends
can you
it-
tell me something, Ed? what this is, let's just say it out loud here. So one of the couple of warrants indicated Sharon Hart was paid. Sharon Hart is the wife of the fire chief. And when I asked at a meeting of the Board of Health, what is it costing us for case tracing, I was told by Charlie Kanicki, $0. So I think there should be a conflict of interest form, such as what Randall signs all the time. We need to have an understanding over what her charges, what her services are, and how does it relate to this CARES Act, and the fact that she's a relative of the department. It's sent to her directly as opposed to South Hadley Health Department. So I just feel like this is not under the jurisdiction of the Board of Health. This is funding that comes to the municipality. So we have every right to understand exactly what all these departments plan to do with the funding and how it may or may not offset the operating budget.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
So I'd like to see a crosswalk between their current budget, what they had planned, and what might or might not be offset by these monies, and then the detail for everything else that was requested.
And also, do they know what funding they actually received, and do they have a plan to spend it, or is this just on a spreadsheet somewhere and a department head could say, gee, I didn't realize. I don't know if this has gone over in department head meetings or not to discuss this on a regular basis.
Yeah, and like I say, some of it I think was, and still is anticipation of what may be needed, down the road if things change too.
Right, but if the people understood at the time that this was services to be realized by the 30th of December, I think that's a very different story than, hiring like an administrative assistant for the fire department. It's the middle of September right now. When is that supposed to happen? And is it clear that you can hire somebody for 3 months? Is it going to be a contracted employee? We still sign off on PCFs. This grant has your and my name on it, Ed. It doesn't have the Board of Health's name on it. This is a municipal grant. I'm very gratified that people here have stepped up to be on a committee to look at CARES Act funding too, which I hope Chris and Matt and you, Ed, are very involved in. But, the people that are at risk for this virus are elderly people. And I don't see the Council on Aging getting much of anything. And maybe they need a little bit more help in generating possibilities. I also am very concerned about the schools. The kids and adults are the ones that I think the fire and police department and Board of Health. I agree with the whole thing about the storefronts. The church is giving out. I wanted every single step of the way. Once the governor released the next phase, whether it's hair salons or nails or whatever. If you're gonna do a good service to the town, you're gonna have someone go down there. Are you clear about the restrictions? Are you clear about, do you need any supplies? We're a community. It's that's what communities do for each other. Anyway,
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask what people want as the next step in terms of this money and this reporting.
Well, yeah, I'd like to, to see exactly where we are in expending these funds that we have, and what's the plan between now and December 30th to use it. I think if we are engaging people on any kind of a contractual basis, what are the terms of those contracts, and should we, what that arrangement, and shouldn't we see it? And the other thing is the documentation of those services that we're paying for, in that come and audit sometime, whether it's our auditors or a government audit that comes in at some point in time, and we don't have adequate documentation, that's when they start to recoup money. And so for the intent of keeping us in, I just want to make sure that there are no questions.
I mean, from my point of view, my experience working for the state with a lot of large grants is they had a budget specific for that grant, and they had to allocate money from that grant and keep track of every single item they bought for that grant, do a reconciliation on a regular basis, and give it to the PI, the principal investigator, that would then look at it, and it would go to the accounting department. You know, if we don't have accounting for all this money, or maybe we're not even spending this money, but yet are we going to spend more time in asking for more? Because we don't know what we're doing with the money we got now.
Yeah,
We're kind of spinning
exactly.
our wheels going forward. So I'd like to see.
Exactly. And also, if the funds are supposed to be realized by the 30th of December and they don't change that, there are a couple of positions that I've heard mentioned, public health nurse at $35,000, and I never saw anywhere where it said fire department administrative assistant, even though I heard somewhere along the way that I didn't hear it in this exercise we just went through. So is that going to go through, it should go through a PQB. If it's a contracted employee, I suppose it doesn't, but this is a grant that came to the municipality. I think we should be aware of the spending on this grant. And if we don't hire a public health nurse for $35,000, then can we add this to the pot for, if we have to return it, does that increase our phase 2 by $35,000?
Right, yeah, I can find that out.
I mean, if our town has been allotted $500 and whatever $1,000, if we don't use anything, can it be added to phase 2?
Sure. I'll find that out for you.
Now, I think that I had asked about when we were resuming the department heads coming, and last time Chief Illingsworth came and the water department came. I think Jerry was on track for the 22nd anyway, right?
Yeah, and thank you for reminding me, because I had asked her that at the time, and she didn't give me a definitive answer, so I'll ask her again.
Okay.
Yeah,
Was there anybody else that was scheduled for next Tuesday?
Right now, I know it's, I've got Chief Wortman coming in and Randall Kemp, so, but I got to follow up and find out about Jerry.
Rini, I'm not sure, but it looks like Chris is trying to say something,
Yeah.
but we can't hear her.
I can't hear Chris.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Chris.
Chris, we can't hear you. Can you hear us?
She's on, she said. I
You
really,
lost the audio? Call me.
Yeah, she's unmuted, so.
Is her computer muted or her volume way down?
Maybe her volume's down or something
She's
like
probably
that.
gonna log out. Just log out and log back in.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any other, well, we have to technically wait for her to come back.
yeah, let's wait. So Matt, you're still at Labrie.
I am watching my son's practicing soccer. Actually, you know what? I'm standing here. I'm gonna wait for the next town meeting. I'm not gonna wait until we have it.
that would qualify as some type of protest, I think.
Yeah.
We're holding you to it.
No, my son's playing soccer right now.
Oh, great.
It's going well.
I used to love, how old is he? Is he going to just like first grade?
He's going
How old
into second grade. He's turning 8 in let's see here, in 15 days. He'll be 8.
Oh, nice.
Awesome.
I used to love watching the little ones. They all like don't always run in the same, they all bunch up.
Looks like Chris is back.
Chris, you back?
Can you hear me? I'm here. Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
but turn up the volume, can you?
I haven't turned it down.
It's very low.
We can hear you.
Yeah, you can hear you, but it's just a little muted.
Okay, I don't know why. I'll move closer if that helps. I don't know. It looks like it's up.
Okay, well, go ahead then. You had a question?
Sorry, yeah, no, I just to follow up on a couple things with comments about, just the accounting. They did make a point on the webinar that this would be audited at some point, very likely, and that we definitely needed to keep not only your basic normal support documentation, but to the extent any personnel were hired, you needed to have things like their timesheets, et cetera, as part of that backup. And so if we have anybody, I mean, I don't know if we're paying for this contact tracing after all. We need to know, how much time has been spent on that, not just a flat fee would not be likely to be accepted.
I guess a question on what Chris is saying about the accounting end. And it has a process been set up where when a department spends money against this budget that Vicki is made aware of it and she could call it out on the expenditures so that we could easily track it by category?
Yes.
So she could give us the amount spent on all the COVID.
If it's not her, it might be Jennifer Day, but one of the two can, yes.
All we see, okay, so they're tracking it, but all we see in our reports are 2 lines.
Right.
Okay.
I think that's the trouble, with the way the grant lines are, then how the accounting department breaks it down so that they know what are the eligible costs that are being presented to them, because the grant categories in the application are pretty broad, right?
Yes, they are. They're very broad.
So to have the real specifics of what is allowable and what is not allowable, I don't know, Vicki needs to be able to know that so she can either accept or reject an invoice coming at her.
Sure.
Can I just ask a question? When we applied for all of this stuff originally, obviously there were needs that we thought we were anticipating and that we thought that we were going to need. I'm assuming that now that this money's come in and kind of where we are with this virus and with everything, and things have obviously leveled off and calmed back down to a certain degree. I mean, what if we come across some areas where like it just doesn't make sense to spend some of these things that we applied for? Is this a question of, if we don't, if we got approved for it and we don't spend it, do we lose it? Or could we proactively maybe in round 2, be looking at some of those items that look like, okay, well, we're probably, we thought we might need this, but we probably don't now. It's a lot of money, and okay, we need this. And, I'm not suggesting that we don't spend all of the money, but like, are we able to realign some of these things, being like, okay, so we don't, I don't want to name a particular line item because it would be silly of me to do that, because I don't know if there are these things, but like, what's that?
Matt, I just did that. I just said if we don't need a $35,000 school nurse, can we use that money in phase 2? Like, can we, or at least on paper, and then does that give us $35,000 more for the next time around?
Yes, but do we have to prove? But I guess my thing is do we have to give that up initially? Like, I'm sure that we can't overspend it and do that internally. Do we have to give it back to the state and say we're not going to do the $35,000 nurse? We want to do it some other way. I mean, is there a process for that?
I'll ask the question and find out.
Because, I mean, just as we're all looking into this now that we're becoming more aware of this funding, there are categories in which we did not request any money that, just from looking at, the needs of some of the residents, I think, whether we're talking about meals or groceries or prescription delivery and those kinds of things that, we might want to consider as part of the funding that goes to the COA and start to get some of that out. The other thing I really don't understand about this is all the money for signage and then electronic signage. What can you tell me what they had in mind?
Well, yes, so you've seen the signs along the highway and along the roads in town, and you can put electronic messages on it. So you could do updates on what is happening with COVID-19, what the new regulations are, or anything that comes along like that.
But I haven't seen those things. Am I missing something?
We haven't ordered them as of yet. We're going through the process.
Can we
and I will
Matt
say,
to mute? I mean, you got the game in the background a lot, Matt.
no, and I will say, I was going to say something there. I mean, I will say that there's a multi-purpose use for those signs. I mean, obviously there's a use for them in COVID times, but these signs have been requested by emergency management in the past, and I do think that they I mean, these signs would be helpful to us long term. There's
Absolutely.
a lot of purpose for these.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, for sure. Like, I mean, you could imagine posting them at Town Hall or on East Street or a mainline traffic way. Like, just try to think about the future, like about a town meeting or about going to a website or about a survey or any other general public service announcement. I mean, it's great to have these signs where you can just type in whatever you want to say and it will just come up.
But coming back to the point that we have to realize the benefit of that by December 30th if we haven't ordered it yet. I mean, so I'm glad it's not like I'm missing something. It's not there. So
Correct.
that answers my question.
John, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say a couple of questions. One, on the signs, if we order them because we don't have enough signs and we want to post them around for COVID warnings, that would be COVID related, and then we get to keep them afterwards. If we have to reuse them for something else, that's great. So I think we should try that. But also the December 30th date, does it mean we have to have a purchase order in? Do we have to have it paid, or do we actually have to have the product in hand using it? That's a big difference. You know, if we have to have it in hand using it, we've got 3.5 months, and this is going to be crucial to get this done now.
Did you want to say something, Chris?
I'm going to say that my experience with grants would be that you at least have to have a purchase order, a signed purchase order at a minimum to obligate those funds. But again, there is that weird language that they kept using about to receive the benefit of it. So I would think most things that we've already applied for and received money for, we need to be moving on. And I don't know exactly. I mean, it's kind of a mixture there, but I think you've got to at least obligate those funds with a purchase order to hold it as a legal document.
But we should check it, because I remember for the state, we had a grant that was $55 million, and everything had to be in by June 30th of that particular year. And we had a scramble because we had less than a year to get it. And some of the lead times on the medical equipment were just astronomical. So I think we should check on that as soon as possible so we know what we're up against.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I'm going to just ask that people for the next week, I want, to keep the CARES Act agenda item. I just want people to think about what kind of reporting. Again, I mean, I know this went to departments. I don't think it's micromanaging. It's a municipal grant. My name's on it. Ed's name's on it. This is not about the departments getting money, and it's their issue and it's their job to actually oversee it. We oversee the operating budget, and a lot of these departments, of course, have line items, and I just want to continue to monitor basically how COVID is impacting these departments. So I really feel strongly about, one, not having a conflict of interest. Two, I want deliverables. If the Board of Health is getting $56,000, I want to know what our town is getting for that.
Yeah.
So I also think if there's anybody that's hired on this grant that is if there's any possibility of a conflict of interest, or it's the funds are being paid to a person as opposed to a entity, then there should be conflict of interest forms like Randall is so good about giving us when his wife is involved in a real estate transaction. So I just want all of this to be above board, transparent, and for it to go a little bit better next time. I also am very aware, because I've been in the middle of this pandemic since it started. March was the worst month of my entire career. I acknowledge the fact that what we knew in May or March was different from what we knew in May, which is different from what we know in August. So I'm very aware that there was a lot of uncertainty. There was a lot of lack of understanding of where this was going to go. And I know it was very heavily focused on emergency management. But I just still feel like we're obligated to know what the plans are for these funds and to have deliverables. So if people could just keep in mind, and next time we discuss, what do people want? What does this board want in terms of reporting on this funds? And anybody else have anything else right now you want to say?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're not adding another layer of red tape to this too. I mean, it is important to be efficient and you know, and we have to be cognizant of that too. So like, I certainly, as a select board member, like don't want us, you know, at the same time, this needs to be transparent and well reported and reportables, but at the same time, I also don't want to be the reason why we're holding anything back. Like, you know, our meeting cadence is every 2 weeks. I do think sometimes, and I'm not suggesting having more meetings. I mean, my gosh, I'm absolutely not suggesting that. But at the same time, like, I don't want our meeting schedule to be a reason why things get held up. I mean, at the end of the day, we've got, you know, closing in on 3 months left here, which in a perfect world is 6 meetings. I doubt that it will be that, but you know, that's what it is. And if we have to spend this money by the end of the year, I really don't want our meeting schedule, you know, hindering that. At the same time, I also, you know, I hear what you're saying, Rainey, about transparency and being aware and at least overseeing it. But at the same time, you know, and I think you've been saying this, like, we don't want to be micromanaging this either.
I don't think there's nothing in our steps really that would hold anything up. I mean, right now, unless it's an employee that they're hiring, which I would doubt would happen because of the time frame, there's nothing that would be held up. It's really about keeping us informed. Because I feel like we were not informed. I was not informed that this money was being spent in this particular way for a municipal grant. I just think we should have been more involved, but I understand about the deadlines and that sort of thing. So all I'm doing is just saying, I think next time around the process should be different. Next time around there should be more transparency. Next time around there should be a little bit more even distribution of funds to departments who are actually more at risk by this than others.
Yeah. Really,
That's
if
all.
I could just add,
I don't think there's any process that we're putting in place.
Yeah, and just to say that next time around is around the corner. I mean, from what I understood on the webinar, they're working on the guidance for phase 2 right now. There's no application deadline, as Ed said, yet, because the federal government doesn't quite know all that they're doing with it yet, to give the states some marching orders too. But somewhere the end of September, they were expecting the guidance to be out with the application somewhere within the first couple weeks of October. So that's not far away.
Yeah, right around the corner.
So for the idea of, you know, understanding what we might have already been spending, I mean, I think that would be, if we could get any idea, maybe from Vicky for our meeting on the 22nd, where we are with the drawdown on what we have already, because I think it's kind of hard to look forward to. I mean, I think we've got a whole big hole, both on the school and on COA, for example, and maybe the library, that we need to spend some time talking to and say, hey guys, you know, what else do you need? And one of the things that our ad hoc grant committee had talked about was, I think, Matt, you were going to work on a spreadsheet of some sort to send out to the various departments and, you know, boards and whomever to say, you know, what do you need for COVID, you know, issues.
Sure, but I was going to do it off of the, I was going to make a relative, and I don't know is that we've gotten this information. It might be in the packet for this evening, but you know, I was going to do it off of creating a list of categories. So I wasn't going to just blanketly send that to them and force them to guess. I wanted to do it based off of the CARES Act categories.
Right.
And I don't think we've gotten
Ed's
that yet.
got that. Yeah. No,
Okay.
Ed, you handed out some of that stuff, right? That's part of what we've got.
Okay.
So I think we could do that because, you know, I think they need to be thinking soon to get their thoughts into the, you know, the main hopper so that Ed can put the whole thing together for the next time whenever the deadline does come out, because it'll probably be a short turnaround again, most likely.
Yes.
Can
Ed,
I
was that in the information sent this evening or sent in the last couple of days?
It would have gone out today. You should have gotten it in an email.
Can I ask?
Francine?
Yeah, when did this funding, when were we able to start using this funding? July 1st?
I'd have to go back and take a look at when we actually got the award letter.
Okay.
I think it was a little later than July 1st, but
So there would be
we'll go
nothing
back
that
and
would,
double check the actual timetable.
okay, but is there anything that retrospectively in our fiscal year 20 expenses that we incurred in that fiscal year that we could apply to this?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
All right.
I think from the end of March, right, Ed? Or sometime in
March,
March?
yeah, that March 27th date.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So I think that, back to your point, Francine, about not only the town meeting, but maybe going forward with the special town meeting you know, we were talking about the costs that we might incur for that in October. I mean, I think that should be one of our thoughts. And if we can't spend something that's already been asked for, we need to just find out if we can reprogram it or not.
Yeah.
But it seems like they'd be eligible. I mean, I would think.
Mhm.
I guess one of my fears is that we're sitting here in January looking back at a lot of money that we could have had for the proper purpose, and we didn't respond properly and spend it, you know. And I don't want anybody in the town coming to us saying, we could have had this money, you didn't do your job, because, and the bottom line is it all reports up to us, so we need to be the ones, you know, overseeing it.
Okay, can I just mention to people that I downloaded and for some reason cannot save to share with the rest of you, but 13 pages of FAQs from the Treasury Department on the Coronavirus Relief Fund with the CARES Act. And there's some very interesting questions which prompted me to start to think about alternate ways in which we might want to think about using money that we may not have thought of. So if I can get I can at least get the link to you, and then if you can all go look it up, because
that'd be great.
Wasn't able to do it. But it was interesting to me to see what other questions and concerns that others had that maybe we hadn't thought of yet.
Yeah,
and that's where I learned a lot about, you know, utility subsidies and food and a lot of other things are in this document that maybe we should look at before we make that second application.
I would think the cost of these Zoom meetings we could apply.
Yeah, the Zoom license, definitely.
And our time.
Yeah. Well, and Ed, I know some of this is through the PEG programming stuff, but you had talked about the voice over the VoIP, right? And I don't know that that's part of the PEG programming. That could be something maybe we could apply for under the CARES Act.
I don't know about that one, but I'll take a look at it.
There was something in there about, improving boardrooms for, remote meetings and things like that. I did see something about that, but it wasn't very defined.
And I guess the upside of these 13 pages of frequently asked questions is that the responses are from the U.S. Department of Treasury. So, I mean, if we need to hang on to a document to prove why we spent money on a certain thing, we have something to point to, and I would look at it from that perspective as well.
A follow-up on Chris's point about maybe some costs for the meetings and upgrading and all that. We put something in the grant request and it gets denied. That's not a negative for us, right? I mean, I'd rather ask for things and have them rejected because they don't apply than not ask for them.
Does anybody have anything else they want to say about the CARES Act or any request in terms of any kind of communication or reporting?
I think just that, if the library and COA folks are listening tonight, just start thinking really hard about some of the needs that you may have that you haven't voiced very well to people. I mean, looking at this application, there's some things I know COA has been talking about, a wellness coordinator or a wellness checking person that doesn't exist. I know I've been doing shopping for seniors. I mean, there were ways to, cover some of this maybe that, we ought to really be sure that we're dealing with in this second round.
Right. We just put together care bags last week to be distributed to people that the COA is aware of.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's be sure that they speak up, I guess.
And like some departments might need a little bit of help in strategizing on some things. So I think that's worth thinking about too. So I would ask if Jerry and anybody representing the Health Department would be able to come to the next meeting. I know that you had asked her to come to the previous meeting and wasn't able to, so hopefully she can come next Tuesday.
Yep.
We can ask additional questions about that. Any other requests for agenda items or on this topic?
I guess just an update of where
Next
we
week, we're going to have the listing
spending
of,
it
what-
I started to say, I guess if we could have a summary of where
Yeah.
we are vis-a-vis the money that we have and the money that we spent, so that we know going forward what we have left.
yeah, like Ed, you were reading from some document that gave the breakdown in the different categories under, I'm just curious if that's a document that you have that you were reading from or notes, but that would be helpful to kind of have, because the general categories don't say much of anything.
What I'll do is, because it's in letter size, you can't read it too easily. It's in your packets. However, what I'll do is I will send you the electronic Excel file. So that way, I mean, what I had to do is I blew them up to legal size. And one's easy to read, one's still a little bit hard to read. But I'll just send you the actual, the 2 Excel spreadsheets I do have that I can send you that way, and then you can look at them that way or print them out on legal or whatever, and it'll be easier to read.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that'd be helpful.
But those have all the notes on it.
Yeah, I just would be helpful to have a document that has that information on it.
Yeah. Well,
And also like, you said accounting up till now.
yeah.
Sure.
Well, I think that will help us sort of think forward too, because as John said, we've got a couple $100,000 already. And if we do, as Ed suggested, to ask maybe for the 400 mark and hopefully get our 75% or some of that, version, the FEMA reimbursable. I mean, that's a lot of money to ask for. And, it's not something that's, necessarily that easy to figure out what some of the costing might be, but I mean, it's a big pot to fill. I mean, if we want to look at it that way, that we want to try and fill the bucket for a $300,000 request, we've got some thinking to do, I think, at the department level, and let alone reviewed by us.
I have another question. I mean, I made reference to the payment out that I don't really know exactly the purpose of the payment that was on the warrant that Francine and Chris saw. But do we have a personnel policy or something that actually says that if there's a family member hired, that there needs to be a disclosure form?
I don't think we have anything in policy form. I think that when we know of that, there's been one instance of that, since I've been here, that we have made that happen and go to the select board. But I'll see what I can find out on the reference to that payment.
Okay.
I mean, I was certainly under the impression that the contact tracing was not a chargeable cost. I mean, I thought we were getting that as a free service. That's what I think we discussed in previous meetings. So I was surprised to see the warrant.
Was it a payable warrant or a payroll warrant?
It was a vendor warrant.
So it could have been a reimbursement.
No, not for 2 months in a row.
July and August.
But if it's payable warrant, it wouldn't be for personnel costs. That would have to be on payroll.
Could you look into that and let me know?
Yeah, I'm going to do that.
Okay, and I think that anybody that's hired contractor stipend, I mean, if it's not policy, it's best practice that they do, such as Randall does, that anybody hired, fill out something that, acknowledges the relationship.
Sure.
I know we're a small town, but I think that's the best thing to do.
Okay.
Next time, we're going to, divvy up again the liaison assignments.
Yes.
So if you could just send out, Ed, the list of the assignments and how often the committees are meeting.
Yep.
So that we can become prepared to divide those up again.
Absolutely. And I'll just
Does anybody else have any?
I'll just remind you that we also have to do a vote for a primary person to sign the warrants and a backup again.
Right. Now, I guess I wasn't the only one that presumed that by voting Chris to be clerk, that has to be a separate thing. That doesn't necessarily go with the clerk responsibilities. So is that on the agenda for next Tuesday,
That will be on the agenda along with the liaison.
along with the assignment?
Yep.
Now, is that anything we can put under that can't wait till next week in case she needs to sign something between now and then?
There's a payroll warrant I've just been told that I need to sign this week.
Francine can still sign that. She's the one that's authorized and John's the current backup.
Okay.
Okay. I think that just going down the agenda, it looks like we have select board meetings. Is everybody else set? Anybody else want to say anything about CARES Act liaison? Anything? Okay, then the select board meeting September 22nd, next Tuesday, and then keeping with the every 2 weeks, October 6th and October 20th, with the town meeting. Did we officially vote for the town meeting to be the 17th?
Yeah, we did.
I think we did. Okay. Okay. Then anything else that can't wait until the next time? I just want to say one thing, that if somebody writes a letter to, like, say, Randall with a CC to the select board, then I would expect that Randall would respond to the letter, and that Ed, as our sort of representative, would actually, either Randall or Ed would let us know, what happened or whatever. I think what I don't want to have happen is that a resident write to us as a CC. I mean, I'm not going to write back to somebody if they're writing to somebody else, like with Ed, to a CC to us. I just feel like, I don't know that we need to jump in if they include us. I just wanted to ask the committee what they thought of this. I think the biggest thing for me is I don't want a resident to write a letter to the select board, such as one we got recently about inquiring about a land possible purchase. And if it went to somebody else, that I wouldn't automatically jump in and respond to it as a CC. But I would want to know that somebody, the right person, was responding to them, so that I wasn't feeling like we're leaving residents hanging. And I just want to see what other people felt about that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I think we discussed this in the past.
Okay.
It's kind of like we all want to do something, but the protocol is let you do it if it's going to you, or let Ed do it.
Yeah, but if it's not going to us, but it's going to a CC, for example, somebody wrote in relative to the storm drains on Pomeroy, that they're, very dangerous for bikers. It wasn't sent to us, it was just a CC, but then I didn't hear anything at all. So I would just like to know that, for example, if Ed contacted Randall, because it was written to Ed with the CC to us, and Randall was dealing with it, I would want Ed to write back to us like he did today and said, Randall's dealing with that.
Right.
I just don't want to keep it in my inbox, hoping that somebody is addressing the problem. So my sort of policy is if it's written to us, then either Ed or I would respond to it. And if it's written to us as a CC, that I would want to hear from whomever, department head or Ed, that it's being addressed, or be included back on a CC to the resident. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes.
Okay, there's just been a couple of things lately. I just want to make sure that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chris.
But just to say that, just if we're CC'd on the original inquiry, I mean, it would seem to me that would make sense. It might make sense that we were CC'd on the response from whomever.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yep. Yep. So Ed, if you could just kind of keep that in mind, because I think
Sure.
in the example I gave, after that mail came in, it just sort of sat there, and you contacted Randall, and Randall was addressing it, but we never heard anything about that.
Okay.
So anything we're CC'd on, we wouldn't be inclined to respond, but we want to know that it's just being addressed if we were included in the original one.
Sure.
So we don't get an email that says fourth request.
So, Rainey,
Okay.
are you there?
So I guess then we'll just have,
Yeah, Matt's trying to
Yeah.
ask something.
Rainey, can
Oh,
everybody
go
hear
ahead,
me
Matt.
all right?
Go ahead.
Yep.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, so I just
Yep.
wanted, it was more of like a point of order thing, because given that we're talking about the storm drains, look, we got to get back to people regardless. So I'm in total agreement of that. But I think kind of the point of order here is my understanding based on the signature of that email is that was not a town resident.
Oh, they're not?
No, it
So
wasn't.
no.
No.
So I just want to make that clear.
Oh, that's a good point. Thank you. I didn't catch that.
No, some
Yeah, good
seemed
point.
it
Really
looked
good
like
point.
it appeared to be a biker passing through town and just
Yeah.
doing what they're
Yeah.
doing. So
Yeah,
anyway,
I
it
think
doesn't
that's-
really matter, but it's worth looking at. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, it's worth pointing out that wasn't a resident.
Yep, I think it's good. I'm sure there are bikers from Southampton that would be at risk too, but I think it's a good point to make. Thanks. So anyway, open time for the public. Is there anybody on the call or any correspondence that we need to address, Ed?
No correspondence.
I don't see anybody on the
I'm aware
call.
of.
Okay, all righty. So at that point, then we'll just have a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Was that Francine?
Yes.
I'll
Okay.
second it.
Mm-hmm. And
I'll
then
second.
Max. All right, all those in favor?
Fishman, aye.
Fowles eye.
Roland,
Martin, aye.
And Groden, aye. Thanks, everybody.
Who had the second on that? Was it Chris or was it Matt?
Did. Matt did.
Matt, go ahead.
Okay.
Pick a name.
All right. Thank you all very much. Have a
All
good
right,
evening.
thank you. Good night, everybody.
See you.
Night.
Okay.
Night.
Good night.